Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be reading from Surah 68, verse number 3. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. 68:3. You have attained a recompense that is well deserved. You are blessed with a great moral character. You will see, and they will see, which one of you are condemned. Your Lord is fully aware of those who strayed off his path, and he's fully aware of those who are guided. Do not obey the rejectors. They wish that you compromise, so they too can compromise. Do not obey every lowly swearer, a slanderer, a backbiter, forbidder of charity, a transgressor, a sinner, unappreciative and greedy. Even though he possessed enough money and children, when our revelations are recited to him, he says, tales from the past. We will mark his face. We have tested them like we tested the owners of the garden who swore that they will harvest it in the morning. They were so absolutely sure. A passing storm from your Lord passed by it while they were asleep. By morning it was barren. Okay, so God willing, I'll just stop here for a while. So this surah is titled The Pen, and God swears by the pen and what the people write, that talking about, I believe, referring to the messenger, that the messenger is not crazy, and he has attained a recompense, great recompense with God, regardless of what the people called him, the names that the people called him with, and the insult that he received. God reassures him that he's blessed with a great moral character, that he's not crazy, because when you have enough amount of people telling you that you're crazy and all these things, then you may begin to doubt yourself, So God is reassuring him that he's not crazy, and there's nothing wrong with his personality. There's nothing wrong with his character. God says you're blessed with a great moral character, and you will see, and they will see, which one of you is condemned. And God is describing these people, who they are. These are the rejectors, these are the compromisers, these are slanderers, the backbiters, forbidder of charity, and they're full of doubt, and they're aggressors, unappreciative and greedy. So all these qualities belong to the same group of people, ironically, that say that the messenger is crazy, right? Now, anybody with all of these qualities obviously himself needs help, right? But telling the messenger that he's crazy, it just shows that they're not able to, grasp the truth that has been presented to them. And says that they wish that you compromise, so they too can compromise, right? So this is something that we need to be aware of, is that there are people that want to compromise, and they want you to compromise also, and that's the reason why, they will tell you that you're harsh and things like that, because they want you to be wishy-washy, just like them, so they can do whatever they want as well. So God says, we have tested them like we tested the owners of the garden who swore that they will harvest it in the morning. They were so absolutely sure. A passing storm from your Lord passed by it while they were asleep. By morning it was barren. They called on each other in the morning, let us harvest the crop. On their way they confided to each other that from then on none of them would be poor. They were so absolutely sure of their harvest, but when they saw it, they said, we were so absolutely wrong. Now we have nothing. They should have said, God willing. The righteous among them said, if only you had glorified God. They said, glory be to our Lord, we have transgressed. They started to blame each other. They said, woe to us, we sinned. May our Lord grant us a better one. We repent to our Lord. Such was the requital, but the retribution of the hereafter is far worse, if they only knew. So these were the people that we're going to harvest their crop in the morning, and they forgot to say God willing. Now, it's a commandment from God that when you're going to do something in the future, when you're expecting to do something in the future, you're planning to do something in the future, you have to say God willing, right? And these people did not do that, and they were so absolutely sure that they will harvest their crop that they forgot about God, So obviously, and for doing that, they lost everything, And so that's why God says that they lost all of the work that they had done on their crops and everything because a storm passed by it and just basically ruined everything. So this is a lesson for us that, every time we're going to do something, we should say God willing. As the subtitle says, they should have said God willing, right? And so then they realized that, yeah, they made a mistake and they repented to God, but obviously they could not get the crops back, right? So they had to face the consequences. And but God says the requital in the hereafter is far worse. So it's not that we should say God willing in these things, like just to save our necks, and save our properties from getting damaged and things like that. But really, the hereafter is far worse. These small consequences here just are attention getters for us, But the hereafter is far worse, and we have to be aware of that always. That we don't do anything that is going to hurt our souls, basically. And God says in verse 34, "The righteous have deserved at their Lord gardens of bliss. Shall we treat the submitters like the criminals?" What is wrong with your logic? Do you have another book to uphold? In it do you find anything you want? Or have you received solemn assurances from us that grant you whatever you wish on the day of resurrection? Ask them, who guarantees this for you? Do they have idols? Let their idols help them if they are truthful. Okay, so God says that the righteous on the day of judgment, have deserved all these blessings, all these rewards, right? But God says, shall we treat the submitters like the criminals? Obviously the criminals are going to get their requital, right? And so the submitters, the true submitters, not the ones that just say they're submitters by lip service, but the true submitters to God, God says He will treat them differently. Now many people believe that they will be treated the same way as the disbelievers. They think that their lives will be very similar to the disbelievers. The only difference would be that they believe that they will just be quiet and patient and submit through it, and their life will be more peaceful. But that's definitely not true. And we know that God says that the life of the submitters, the life of the believers, is very different from the life of the disbelievers. The believers are blessed by God with perfect health, wealth, and happiness. They are not going to be treated the same way as the disbelievers, who always have problems in their life, and all kinds of health problems, marital problems, all kinds of these issues, right? And then obviously on the day of judgment, it's going to be far worse too, right? So their life and their death is not the same, and so God says that He will treat them not the same. He'll treat the two groups not the same way. They'll be way different from each other, and that the believers will be blessed in this world, and they will be blessed in the hereafter with happiness, joy, and blessings, while the disbelievers will constantly have chaos, problems, and misery in their life, regardless of the amount of wealth or success, worldly success they may have, right? So this is God's promise, and God says, do you have any other book to uphold? Do you find anything you want? Where in it do you find anything you want? Like the books of Hadith, you find anything you want. And so they have those books, like the traditional Muslims believe the same way. They think that they will have a miserable life in this world. They say this worldly life is like a prison for the believers, and a heaven for disbelievers, and all this stuff, right? But but God says, He gives the believers paradise on earth and in the hereafter also. So They live a perfect life now and forever, basically. So quite the opposite. Ask them, verse 40 says, ask them who guarantees this for you. Do they have idols? Let their idols help them if they are truthful. Now, obviously, these people are idol worshippers, and God says, do they have idols? Let their idols help them if they're truthful, But obviously, the idols have no power, so they cannot help them. Verse 42, the day will come, verse 42, the day will come when they will be exposed and they will be required to fall prostrate, but they will be unable to. With their eyes humiliated, with their eyes subdued, humiliation will cover them. They were invited to fall prostrate when they were whole and able. Therefore, let me deal with those who reject this hadith. We will lead them on whence they never perceive. I will give them enough rope. My scheming is formidable. SubhanAllah. So, God says that one day, eventually, they will be exposed and will be required to fall prostrate, but they will not be able to. So on the Day of Judgment, some people who have managed to deceive the believers, on the Day of Judgment, they will finally be exposed, right? And God says that they will be required to fall prostrate. Of course, in front of God, everybody's required to fall prostrate. But the believers, only the believers will be able to do it, and then the disbelievers will not be able to fall prostrate before God. And God says, because it will manifest in front of everyone that these were the people who disbelieved. And God says, with their eyes subdued, humiliation will cover them. Right? When they were required to fall prostrate, when they were whole and able, they were invited to fall prostrate when they're whole and able. So imagine, the word here being used is invited, so they were, given invitation to fall prostrate and they refused to. So now they want to fall prostrate, but now it's too late. So you don't even deserve to fall prostrate at that time. Falling prostrate to God also, it's like an honor. You're able to do that, to serve God, to worship Him. They're not able to do that. Just even a little bit they can't do, right? So we can see like how precious this life is, that we have this opportunity to fall prostrate before God, to worship Him, to commemorate His name, to do all these things to grow our soul. Because on the Day of Judgment it will be too late, and you cannot do anything to try to please God at that time. You failed the test, basically. And God says, let me deal with those who reject this hadith. So there are people who in favor of all the other hadiths that they have decided to uphold, they have disregarded and rejected this hadith. This hadith also, this was the only hadith that Muhammad was supposed to preach, right? Which is the word from God, where God calls it the best hadith, right? And so God says, let me deal with those who reject this hadith. He says, we will lead them on whence they never perceive, right? These people who are upholding the hadith and sunnah, are so absolutely sure that they are following something that is from God, and they're so absolutely sure that they're willing to condemn anybody who doesn't follow this path, and they're willing to kill them, willing to assassinate them, willing to kill them, willing to imprison them, willing to give them the worst treatment for believing in Quran alone, right? They're so absolutely sure. And they're so sure that when they die, they're going to have this life full of like 72 virgins minimum and all this nonsense. They're already like planning what they're going to have in paradise, given any of them even believe in paradise, for them, they know it's a joke to them, and they make it sound like a joke to others. But really, they're so sure, but they're being led as we speak. They're being led in a way that they do not even perceive. They don't even know how badly they're trapped in Satan's schemes, and because the belief is not there in their hearts, that they're being dragged into the hellfire by their own volition. So God says this is God. These are God's words, obviously, right? God says, "I will lead them on once they never expected. I will give them enough rope. My scheming is formidable." So imagine, like, all these people that are doing all these mischiefs in the name of God. All these evil things in the name of God or not in the name of God. All these hypocrites that are leading double lives in this world. God says that I will lead them on. I will lead them on once they never perceive. So they don't even know what's coming to them. God is giving them enough rope. If someone has the the in the will to cause all chaos and cause all these criminal activities, oppressing women, killing people for anything they want, all of this stuff. I mean, God says He will give them rope. Like, look at countries like Iran, for example, and other countries where Afghanistan, where people are allowed to be in power in the government. God has given them enough rope. God has given them, power to just do whatever they want. They're presidents and prime ministers and, all these leaders, and they're able to do anything they want in the name of God. And God is allowing them to do that. Because all of the corrupt hadith and sunnah and idol worship that they have put themselves in. I mean, they're allowed to. God is giving them enough rope to do. Okay, you have the full power to do whatever you want. Nobody's gonna question you. Nobody's gonna hold you accountable. Just do whatever you want, right? This is God's rope. Saudis, look at the Saudis, same thing, right? I mean, God is allowing these, Mohammedans specifically to do anything, and so God says, "My scheming is formidable." This authority that God has given them on this planet, for them to commit all the evils that they can, that they're capable of, so they can incriminate themselves, provide evidence against themselves in this world, so they can be justly thrown into the hereafter, in hell, in the hereafter. Verse 46 says, "Are you asking them for money so they are burdened by the fine? Do they know the future? Do they have it recorded? You shall steadfastly persevere in carrying out the commands of your Lord. Do not be like Jonah, who called from inside the fish. If it were not for his Lord's grace, he would have been ejected into the desert as a sinner. But his Lord blessed him and made him righteous. Those who disbelieved show the ridicule in their eyes when they hear the message and say he is crazy. It is, in fact, a message to the world." So one thing we see here, that the messenger doesn't ask for any money. So God says, "Are you asking for money?" Doesn't ask for a wage. And God says, "Are you asking for money so they're burdened by the fine?" Obviously not. So what is their problem? If it's free to believe, it's not taking any money from you. Just believe, for your own good. What is their excuse that is keeping these people from believing in God? There should be no excuse for these people, because they have every means to worship God, to do what God says. And even if there was money in question, I mean, the money would have been a blessing to spend in the cause of God, right? But the messenger's not even asking them for money. He says, just believe. He's not asking for a fee, but he's just saying, just believe, and they don't. So what is their excuse? God says, do they know the future? Do they have it recorded? Do they have a surety from God that they're going to be saved? I mean, what is their excuse? And so God says, you shall steadfastly persevere in carrying out your Lord's commands. And so God has given us the example of Jonah, because he was a messenger and he decided to abandon his mission, as a messenger. And so God is telling the messenger here that he shall steadfastly persevere and not be like Jonah, because Jonah thought that he could get away with the duty that was given to him, but he was wrong and he made a mistake. And so God is telling the messenger to not be like that. And God says, if it were not for his Lord's grace, he would have been ejected into the desert as a sinner. So, he could have been ejected somewhere out in the desert by the fish. Not necessarily killed, but just ejected somewhere as in the desert as a sinner. But God blessed him. He sent him to the people to be able to resume working on his mission. And he survived. God made him blessed, and so many people followed him. He was an important part of God's message. And God says 100,000 or more people actually believed with him. And he preached the land and spread God's message. So, the takeaway here for us is that if God tells us to do something, we should not think that we can get away with it. There's no choice we have once God has given us commandments. We have to follow them, even if we feel that they're too hard for us. We have to do them because they're all there for our own good. If you want God to help you, you have to do what God is telling you to do for your own good. And if you don't, then you can expect these kind of consequences, all kinds of consequences, and no support from God, and obviously hell at the end, right? So we have to be very, very, honest to ourselves that we have to do justice. Whatever God says, we know this is what God says. What am I doing? It's time for, let's say it's time for sunset in 20 minutes. What are you doing? Are you commemorating God? What is on your mind? Are you thinking about God during the day? So we must ask ourselves these things, and we should try to be as diligent as possible in making sure that we are following all of God's commandments. The more we follow, the easier it's going to become. We should ask God to make it easy for us, to allow us to see, to be not unaware, to know when we have to commemorate God, what we have to do, in every situation, to guide us to those every moment in our lives. And God says, those who disbelieve show their ridicule in their eyes when they hear the message. So there are people that show ridicule in their eyes when you invite them to the truth, and they look down on you. Not just they look down on you, but they actually ridicule you with their eyes. And you can see it in their eyes. It's a form of expression, when you look at something and it's like if you see someone who's crazy, and stupid, right? You look at them and you give them a certain look, right? And so God says in the Quran that when they hear the message from the believers, they give that look to the believers. They think they're stupid and crazy, right? And they don't pay attention. And so God says, and they say he's crazy. But God says, it is in fact a message to the world. So this Quran is a message from God to the world, right? And so if you think about it, this is a message for all humanity, right? And so you cannot put a price on it or anything. It's a message for everybody, and it has to go to every single person in the world for free. And obviously, because God did not put a price on it, the messenger is not asking for a wage, and but this is message from God. This is not a joke. This is a message from the Creator, from the Lord of the heavens and the earth. So it has to be taken seriously, not being ridiculed, not being shown ridicule, and being called all kinds of names for just delivering the message. So God willing, I'll continue reading Surah 69, Incontestable, Al-Haqqa, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. The incontestable event. What an incontestable event. It is truly incontestable. Thamud and Ad disbelieved in the shocker. As for Thamud, they were annihilated by the devastating quake. As for Ad, they were annihilated by a persistent, violent storm. He unleashed it upon them for 7 nights and 8 days, violently. You could see the people tossed around like decayed palm trunks. Can you find any trace of them? Pharaoh before him and the sinners of Sodom were wicked. They disobeyed the messenger of their Lord. Consequently, he requited them a devastating requital. The flood was devastating, so we carried you on the floating ark. We rendered it a lesson for you that any listening ear may understand. So God is, this surah of this title is incontestable, Al-Haqqa. And the meaning, incontestable here is referring to, the word incontestable here is referring to the hereafter, the event, as it says, the incontestable event that is truly incontestable, right? This is referring to the hereafter because it cannot be contested. It cannot be challenged. It cannot be stopped. It's inevitable, and it's something that you cannot challenge. And God says the people of Thamud and Ad disbelieved in the shocker. They disbelieved. Now the shocker, the hereafter is the day of judgment here is being referred to as the shocker because obviously it's going to shock everybody. Humans have never seen anything as shocking or will ever see anything as shocking as the hereafter, in this world, right? Ever. This is going to be the most horrific event that the humans will witness when they see, masses falling from the clouds. The earth shattering itself, and the heavens falling apart. It's gonna be devastating, right? So and then just being worried about their own life. Especially if they lived a life of unawareness from God and disbelief, which is majority of people, right? And so obviously this is gonna shock people, and God says it's gonna be so shocking that it could even turn an infant's hair gray, right? So shocking. But God says these people disbelieved in it. The people of Ad and Thamud. Now Ad was annihilated. Thamud was annihilated by a devastating quake. Ad was annihilated by a persistent violent storm. Quakes and storms, as we can see in this world, are pretty common now, right? Because people are not believing in it, and a lot of the people that are being annihilated because of it are people that God already knows that they're not going to believe, right? And so these people are being annihilated as well. But these examples, specific examples, are given here for us as lessons that look, this is what happened to those people. Can we expect something like that tomorrow? Yes, we can. We can see with the way the climate's changing. There's no place that's immune to natural disasters, right? And so it could happen to anybody. Look at what happened in Turkey recently, how they were annihilated by devastating quake. Not everybody was annihilated, but a lot of people, thousands of people, right? Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced and thousands dead, So and then we have storms happening all the time. Weather is so unpredictable for people, right? And this is all being controlled by God, right? And so these examples are there for people to learn from also. God says he unleashed it upon them for 7 nights and 8 days violently. You could see the people toss around like they were decayed palm trunks, right? So like now is a good time to look at the decayed palm trunks, especially here in California, because we have such strong winds every now and then, and you have the decayed palm trunks from the end of the winter, so you can see like how they're tossed around when the wind blows, and the people were being tossed around like that, right? Now, when you see, for example, when you see tornadoes, and if you see a tornado where people are enveloped by a tornado, this is exactly how they get tossed around. Anything gets tossed around, cars, houses, it can pick up anything. These are such strong forces of nature that God has put in place, right? And so these people challenged God, and so they were annihilated, right? And so regardless of how people are annihilated, the system is very consistent, that anybody who disbelieves, they are annihilated. So they suffer, a lot, before their life ends, and then it ends up in their death, right? Eventually, but they suffer, a lot of misery. On the contrary, the righteous will not go through that. An angel will invite them before their life on earth is terminated, and they will not feel any pain, regardless of whether they're shot or stabbed or anything, right? Their soul will be taken before anything happens to their bodies. This is God's promise. Similarly, God says the people of Pharaoh, before them, God drowned them, obviously. People of Sodom, we also know that they were showered also by a certain shower, as God says, because they were wicked people, right? Now, now we see here, obviously, that there's no justification for these types of things, right? For example, God says people of Sodom, he says, and Pharaoh, they were wicked people, right? So people say, no, well, you are born this way and all this nonsense, and there's this in your genes, and all of that stuff has been proven wrong, by the way, with science, right? But they justify. But God says, no, there's simply people who are wicked, right? There's simply people who are wicked, and they do wicked things, and then they get in the habit of it, and then they don't want out of it. So God says they disobeyed the messenger and their Lord. Consequently, he requited them a devastating requital. And so then God gives us the example of Noah, the flood that happened around the time of Noah. There's a local flood, not a global one, but it was a flood that annihilated the people around Noah that disbelieved in his message. And so, God says, so we carried you on the floating ark. Now, these believers were saved by God from that disaster. Imagine like it was a disaster that annihilated everybody, but just the people who believed, except the people who believed. So what does it show to us? That you have to believe in God for your own good. If you want to survive, if you don't want catastrophes to annihilate you and end up being the losers in the hereafter, follow God, right? So, but people still don't do it. Imagine going through all of this stuff and all of this stuff being documented and preserved with their history, and people are still being hypocrites, right? So instead of believing in God. And so God says that we rendered it a lesson for you so that any listening ear may understand. When the horn is blown once, the earth and the mountains will be carried off and crushed, utterly crushed. That is the day when the inevitable event will come to pass. The heaven will crack and fall apart. The angels will be all around, and your Lord's dominion will then encompass 8 universes. And the footnote says, this earth is full of misery because of its physical distance from God, since it is in the 7th universe, 7143, in the hereafter, an 8th universe will be created that will be even farther from our 7th universe. It will be called hell. So, the description of how this is going to be. Just the part that says the earth and the mountains will be carried off and crushed. Can you just picture that for a second? How devastating that's going to be. You just see like the house shaking when you have a little bit of an earthquake and like you're horrified, right? Imagine like all the mountains being crumbled and the earth, literally being taken down from your feet. How is that going to make people feel? Obviously, they will be horrified. That's an understatement, right? And God says that the earth and the mountains will be carried off and crushed. That is the day when the inevitable event will come to pass. That heaven will crack and fall apart. Imagine all the galaxies and the stars, everything just falling apart in front of us, and like literally hell breaking loose. Yeah, that's the right description of hell breaking loose, because hell will be created. The 8th universe will be created on that day, the world will literally fall apart, right? Everything we know is gonna get everything as we know it now is not gonna be there. So truly devastating, right? And so why? So the question we must ask ourselves is why aren't people preparing for such a horrible day? I mean, people are preparing for every little thing like stock market going down and all this kind of stuff that is just laughable when you think about it in contrast to hereafter. But they're not worried about their hereafter, you know. So what's the explanation? I mean, of course, they're simply disbelievers, and that's the point that is being proven here by God, that these people are not believers, because if they were, obviously they would be preparing for it. They don't believe in God, they're failing the test, right? So what should we be doing? We should be taking heed. We should be thinking about that day. We should be aware of that day. We should be mindful of all these events that were going to happen. I mean, this is not fairy tale, right? This is proven scripture of God, mathematically proven. We know for a fact that this is going to happen one day, right? So why aren't we preparing for it the way we should, right? We have to do what God says, and we have to prepare for it. We have to be mindful of it. We have to remember God. We have to ask His forgiveness. We have to work hard and run towards, as God says, the forgiveness and a paradise whose width encompasses, the seven universes. Whose width encompasses the heavens and the earth, right? Same thing. So really, this is something that when we think about it, God, when you reflect on it, God will give you, the strength in your soul to be able to carry out His commandments. The motivation is going to come when you're aware of God, when you're aware of the hereafter. You will naturally would want to prepare for it, right? If you are not even aware that you're going to have an exam tomorrow, how are you going to prepare for it, if you don't think it's going to happen? But if you know it's going to happen and it's proven to you it's coming, and you don't want to fail, believe me, nobody wants to fail, right? So then we must prepare for it as best as we can, so God willing we can be successful and we have a life that we are proud of at the end when we look at our record and show it to others. And we are redeemed by God, and one of those, God willing, that can be closest to God. So with this, God willing, I'll end. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you.
MashaAllah, great study, brother.
So thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to comment. I wanted to comment like on the verses. I think that we're talking about the retribution, for Thamud and Ad, and it's kind of like you said. I guess we see this stuff. Like I was talking with somebody not too long ago about like they were talking about all these terrible things and earthquakes and stuff that happen to places like Haiti, you know, and I told him, I was like, man, some of these, it's common to see that like these places they practice voodoo, witchcraft. I mean, they do, they do the worst, some of the worst things, and it's just, I guess it's God's retribution. It'll still come to people today, and we're giving all kind of examples, but I guess people, they overlook it, or they don't believe in it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was you're talking about the stock market. It was just talking to somebody today. They were it's kind of funny. They were all worried about like all the gold and stuff being bought up, you know. Uh, they were talking with somebody else, and it was you could see, you know, it was what you said. You could see how stressed out these people are about these world events, but it's like, you know, all this is going to be gone one day. You know, it's just temporary. You know, and I mean, this is somebody who I've kind of given the message to, so just it's you know, it's just a little surprising to see. You know.
Anybody else has anything to share? Yeah. So okay. So brother said I was in the wrong path since I was born as a Sunni Muslim. I found about the truth about Islam through my best friend in 2017, but I denied it and called him stupid and wrong. And I used to say Islam isn't complete without Hadith and Sunnah. But since then, I started doubting what's in Sunnah and Hadith. And it was later in 2020, while I was quarantined alone during COVID, that it just came to my mind, why not see what my friend has been talking about? Okay, I'm starting into my question. Just a minute, please. Yeah, quite similar story. And you see the why, obviously, why you got COVID. Okay, so, brother, can you talk? Do you, do you want to talk? Um, you can use your microphone. Okay, so the question he's asking is, I'm still kind of forced to take part in their activities. Says the night after what I went through, what Dr. Rashad was saying, I was guided with God's will. I felt like I heard Quran for the first time, but since I came to the right path, I'm still living in a Sunni Muslim community, so I'm still kind of forced to take part in their activities. What should I do about it? Well, I mean, why are you, oh, how are you being forced into their activities? You know, it's like somebody forcing you by, like,
Can you hear me?
yes, yes, brother.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Since it's just, only my friend and like a few of his brothers that follow the right path, and I also told some other friends of mine, but they still haven't believed it. Unfortunately, some they believe half of it, but not completely. And since my parents are very strict about Sunni teachings, like at home, and I'm supposed to go to prayer with them and all. If not, like I'm being scolded and like it's a lot of trouble here. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so you're still living with your parents. So, is there any way you can not live with your parents?
Like even if I move out, the thing is, if I'm not seen in mosque in places with the Sunni people, like I wouldn't be safe here because it's very they are very extreme Muslims here. You know.
What is it in Bangladesh? Is it Bangladesh?
No, no, I'm in Maldives.
Okay, okay, okay. Uh, okay, well, okay. So, I mean, so if you lived in a different location, I mean, God, because God says, in the Quran, God says, "My earth is spacious," So God says there are people that, the angels will terminate their life in a state of wronging their souls, and they will ask them, "Was my earth not spacious enough for you to immigrate?" So I mean, it's a big country, so you could go anywhere else where you obviously your parents will not know whether you attended the mosque or not if you're in a different location, right? It'll be easier for you that way, right? Rather than where you are now. So yeah, so I mean, God says that the believers, it's also a commandment also to immigrate. I mean, obviously, if you're weak or something, for whatever reason, you cannot immigrate. God understands that, right? But God knows like what is in your ability. What if you have some capability to move, then you should do it in the cause of God, right? So it'll be counted as a good deed for you, for your efforts, whatever hardship you may go through as part of your moving process, right? But yeah, if you're in such a situation, that's what you should be doing. That's what you should do. Try to avoid being part of it as much as possible. Where you're being forced, I mean, I can understand. Let's say if you're being forced, but like, let's say like you don't have the means to move, right? But if you have the means to move, then you should move. Otherwise it becomes
Yes.
apathy.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, otherwise it becomes apathy where someone has the means to do something and they're not doing it, so it just becomes like, is it not important enough, uh, then it becomes a case of that, right? So when you have the ability to move out of that situation, then you should move, right? But if you don't have the ability, then God knows your circumstances and He will judge your circumstances accordingly, right? But this is a serious thing, right? So, yeah. I mean, even if you went to their mosques, right? So, what do you do? I
Yeah.
mean, when you go, do you pray like them or what?
Yeah. I have to join them. Then I have to come back home and pray the right way separately. That's how I do it now.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because over there in front of them, you cannot even pray the right way, right? They'll try to correct
Yeah.
you.
I can't because yeah, if I'm at home, if unless I'm outside or walking, like I have to go to the mosque with my grandparents or parents. Uh, so that's the situation. So like I have to pray separately the right way, and then I also have to join them. So I just wanted to make sure, like, if since right now I don't have any other choice. Yeah, and here the real Muslim population is like I know only so far like 10 people. So most of the people are not doing it the correct way.
10 people are submitters?
Yeah, yeah. I know only 10 people. I found out through my best friend. He found out through his brother, who found out from a friend. And first, when I was told about it, I didn't believe it too.
Right, yeah, that's
But then
understandable.
later during COVID, I was alone and I thought, yeah, why not go through it just for once and instead of complaining. And then I just found out how true it was, like how misguided I was before and all that.
Right. Yeah, subhanAllah. I
Yeah,
mean, there's
because
no.
I
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah because I used to read the Quran before also like a lot, but after that night it was like I was reading it for the first time.
SubhanAllah.
MashaAllah.
you for sharing, brother Moshe. I really appreciate it. We also have another person here, Gita. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Geeta Baramipur. Thank you for having me. And I am so sorry. I have a hard time sometimes to unmute myself. But I'm still listening and I'm out of town. I'll be back in this, California tomorrow. So I will have a lot of questions next time that I'm on. But thank you so much for the
You're
teaching.
welcome.
It's excellent. Well,
Mashallah,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you
God
very much.
bless.
God bless
Thank
you
you.
too. All right. So, are there any more comments from anyone? Any questions? Any off topic? Okay. So, if not, God willing, we can conclude our study. So, thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you, brother. Great study. Salāmun Alaykum.